I found out on a Wednesday, the week before Christmas, when the brisket list hit everyone's phone but mine. The family thread, Calder Holiday 2025, had my name in the banner photo and my absence in every bubble. They were dividing dishes, rides, even the playlist. I didn't see it, of course, because the bubble never arrived. My neighbor, June, held her phone over our shared fence and said, "Ruthie, honey, do you want me to bring green beans or are you not going?" I smiled and adjusted the little wreath on my mailbox. "First I've heard of it." June's brow gathered. "Maybe someone left you off by accident." "Maybe." When she left, I stood in my quiet kitchen, the one off Barton Hills with the stove that runs a little hot and the potholder my mother knitted when red yarn was on sale. On the table, my 7-day pill minder sat open. Tuesday was still empty. I tapped my pen twice and wrote the time in the notebook I keep near the phone. Habit, not panic. 3:12 p.m. June showed me group text. Not included. The kettle clicked. I poured. I waited. I didn't cry. I watched the steam curl past the window where the live oak collects morning light and the noise of South Lamar fades to a hum. In the hum, I heard my mother's principle. If someone forgets you, remember yourself louder, but with ink. My days look small from the outside. They are not. I write numbers in the margins. Blood pressure, call durations, refill reminders. I keep notes because memory is a generous animal until it's startled by someone else's certainty. After my husband died, I learned to prefer numbers that don't argue. At HB Pharmacy, the pharmacist knows me as Ms. Calder with the tap-tap. He checks interactions when I ask twice, never impatient. "You're right to verify," he says, printing the tiny slip that shows the date I picked up the refill and the counseling offered. I keep the slip in a clear sleeve. At UFCU on Guadalupe, Mr. Delgado hums when he prints statements. The December paper trail, he calls it, sliding the pages under glass. If anyone ever needs to see that your ATM card never left your block, this shows it. He taps a timestamp. Cameras face the tellers. I walk home down quieter streets. The air smells like cedar and someone else's barbecue. I think of Christmases when I drove the route with paper angels in the backseat. The angels grew up and forgot paper. I have more. The call came at 9:47 p.m. A time designed to arrive when you're soft. Mark, my son. Caller ID still used the photo from his wedding when he was 29, sunburned, laughing at a joke his friend told that I didn't get. I pressed accept. "Mom," he said. "For letters." No warmth. "Yes, you've been really hard to reach." "I'm at the same number," I said. Text messages bounce. I get messages from the pharmacy and the bank. A breath. "We're worried. The house is a lot. Maybe we should consolidate keys. Just for the holidays. Make it simpler." Simpler for whom? For everyone. Tina agrees. He added, "Everyone agrees," like he was reminding me that this world ran on votes. "I'll consider what's safe and lawful," I said. There was a little silence shaped like surprise. He tried a smile in his voice. "Mom, it's for your own good." I pictured the spare key hook near my back door. "I'm good tonight," I said. "Good night, Mark." After, I wrote the time in my notebook, 9:51 p.m. Mark suggested keys. Said, "Everyone agrees and for your own good." I printed the call log and slid it behind the note. I sent myself an email with the same text. Redundancy is what you do when love becomes slippery. 2 days later, I sat at a small round table at a strip mall law office by Airport Boulevard. The sign said Elder and Everyday Law, which made me like them. The attorney, Ms. Lin, wore a cardigan that looked like a calm answer. "I'm not here to escalate," I said. "Good news," she said. "Documentation de-escalates. Tell me what you brought." I gave her copies, call logs, pharmacy slips, bank statement highlights, screenshots from June's phone showing the holiday thread assigning roles like I was a ghost at my own table. Ms. Lin read fast. "All right. We'll do 3 things. 1. Living trust with Harper Fiduciary Services, neutral executor/trustee, so if anyone says mom's being coached, you can smile. 2. No contest clause in the will. It won't prevent a fight, but it'll tell the judge where you stand. 3. A boundaries letter, calm and boring, sent certified. We'll avoid adjectives and use dates. Adjectives are expensive, I said. She smiled. Judges like nouns. And USPS barcodes. What about harassment? I asked. If calls or visits become threatening, we file for a protective order at the Travis County Clerk's office. The burden is lower than guardianship. The remedy is narrower. Sometimes a filed document is a better parent than a person. I nodded. Let's write it down. The next morning I signed in front of a notary who said, I like when folks read every line. I read every line. Janice Harper from Harper Fiduciary slid the trust binder to me. She squared the edges with a small, precise motion that suggested she'd survived worse families than mine. We'll stay neutral, Ms. Calder. That's the point. We manage processes, not people. I appreciate processes. She slid a business card into the sleeve. If your children call, we log the call and ask them to send requests in writing. That reduces adjectives. At the post office, I sent 2 certified envelopes with return receipts, one to Mark, one to Tina. The letters were nothing but dates and boundaries. Keys stay with me. Medical decisions remain mine unless I appoint otherwise. Holiday plans require invitations, not demands. I did not mention love. I let the green cards, PS Form 3811, promise to come home with signatures that say delivered. On the sidewalk, the world felt newly technical, barcodes, timestamps, a choreography of ink. I wasn't happy. I was clear. On Christmas Eve, Tina called. Unknown number. I answered because I still wanted to be the kind of person who answers. Mom, she said, all soft. We missed you. I looked at the green cards on my counter, both unsigned yet. I wasn't invited. Oh, come on. Everyone knew. We posted the time. You would have come if you cared. I care enough to require an invitation, I said. Tone is not a plan. Her voice hardened. This is why we need keys. What changed? I asked. Last month you said I was still sharp as a tack in front of your friends. Now I'm brittle. Silence opened. She had forgotten that words have dates. I had not. She exhaled. We're doing this because we love you. Then love me with a calendar, I said. Put me on it. I ended the call, noted the time, and wrote one line, timeline crack, Tina's sharp as a tack comment, NOV potluck. I taped the note to the inside of a binder tab and labeled it Exhibit E Future. The letter E made my hand steadier. Letters don't shout. They sort. At Kirby Lane Cafe, June slid into the booth and ordered pancakes she never finishes. She set her phone down carefully. Ruthie, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have shown you that thread. No, you should, I said. Now it exists in the world. She stirred her coffee. If you need me to say what I saw, about the thread, about your routine, I will. But I don't want to be in a family war. You won't be, I said. You'll be in a document. That's different. June laughed, then bit her lip. You're handling this like a scientist. Like a widow, I said. Scientists have labs. Widows have kitchens and binders. We split the pancakes. I kept the receipt, wrote Kirby Witness across the top, and slid it into the sleeve. The receipt would not matter. What mattered was what the receipt told me about time. I was still choosing where to spend it. The night after Christmas, a car idled at my curb. I turned off my lamp and stood to the side of the window, old habit. A figure, Mark's height, came to the door and tried the knob. He jiggled it like a question. I dialed non-emergency and said, hello. No immediate danger. I just want this recorded. The operator took my name and the time. I wrote the incident number next to it. I didn't open the door. I slid the spare keys off the hook and put them in the freezer inside a sandwich bag, a small private ritual that made me laugh. If someone demanded keys, I could hand them a bag of cold safety. When the car pulled away, the house exhaled. I sat and wrote a paragraph in the notebook, every sentence beginning with a date. Dates turn feeling into fact. Facts survive in rooms where feelings don't. On December 27th, I walked into the Travis County Clerk's office with my cardigan buttoned wrong, a trick my mother taught me when she wanted to look harmless in rooms where decisions happen. I filed for a protective order, not to punish, just to set a boundary with a stamp. The clerk, a man about my age with kind hands, said, "Ma'am, this starts a short clock. Someone will call. You'll have a date." "I like dates," I said. He returned my copies with a file stamp that felt like the thud of a gavel softened for everyday use. On the way out, I bought a bottle of water from a machine and wrote the time on the label before I took a sip. My ordinary world had not shrunk. It had acquired evidence. New Year's Eve morning, Mark called again, voice tight. "You filed something?" "Yes." "Against your own family?" "Against behavior that crosses lines," I said. He laughed, but without humor. "We'll see about that." "You will," I said. "In a room with a judge. Bring your calendar." I hung up and tapped my pen twice. The house felt like a place where I could hear myself think. Outside, a neighbor's wind chime made its gentle arguments. I opened my binder to exhibit a call logs and felt the paper's small, stubborn weight. I thought of New Year's resolutions and decided I liked renewals better. Resolutions exist as wishes. Renewals exist as documents. I started the new year like I finished puzzles, by finding the edges. On January 2nd, Austin felt rinsed, cold, bright, and too honest for excuses. I wrote the date at the top of a fresh page, underlined it twice, and added a list that was not a prayer and not a battle plan. Bank. Pharmacy. Clerk. APS. Council. Neighbor. If family had become a weather system, this was my barometer. UFCU on Guadalupe still smelled like printer toner and citrus cleaner. Mr. Delgado hummed a bar of something familiar, maybe Willie Nelson, and then caught himself, a man trying not to bring a tune into a courtroom. "Miss Calder," he said, laying out statements as if dealing a deck he wanted me to win, "I printed November through mid-January. We'll avoid the snapshot problem where folks cherry-pick a bad day." He circled 3 items: my in-branch teller visits with timestamps, ATM withdrawals within 2 miles of my home, and a line that read "no third-party access on file." "See," he said, tapping, "continuity supports capacity. Also, I'll write a manager's note." He slid me a paragraph with bank letterhead. "Customer demonstrates independent management of accounts, consistent transactions. No red flags suggesting undue influence. Staff interactions reflect comprehension and informed questions." He initialed the bottom. I watched the ink dry the way farmers watch the sky. "Mr. Delgado," I said, "may your humming make it to the transcript." He laughed under his breath. "Judges don't get the soundtrack, Miss Calder. They get the paper." I put the letter behind a tab I labeled Exhibit D with a neatness I hoped would rub off on everyone I loved. At HP Pharmacy, the pharmacist swung the gate and let me stand at the counseling counter, the little island where worry gets translated into dosage and timing. "We can give you the medication counseling logs, the refill slips, and the dates you requested extra verification," he said. "Do you want the printouts stapled or sleeved?" "Sleeved," I said. I've learned paper and staples have a complicated marriage when judges are watching. He smiled. "You're right." He added a note of his own. "Patient engages appropriately with counseling, maintains pill minder. No concerns about adherence or comprehension." I slid everything into Exhibit G, the plastic sleeve whispering against the binder like a small applause. "Anything else I can do?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Keep standing where you stand. It makes the world less noisy." The Travis County Clerk's office had Tuesday faces, tired, capable, unwilling to play narrator for anyone. I asked for certified copies of my protective order petition and watched the clerk's stamp fall with the same measured force a judge's gavel uses when she's saving someone from theater. "Ma'am," the clerk said, eyes kind but not curious, "you'll get a call with a hearing window." "I like windows," I said. "They let in light." I slid the copies behind Exhibit B, with my 2 green PS Form 3811 cards I was still waiting on. The cards would come back signed or they would come back with a story. Either way, they would return. Back at home, Ms. Lynn's email arrived with a boundaries letter attached, calm, airless, administrative. All future visits by appointment, no collection of keys or documents without written consent. Medical decisions remain Ms. Calder's absent prior written authorization. Inquiries and requests routed through counsel. Any further harassment will be addressed through civil protective relief. No adjectives. Dates like fence posts. She sent it certified and by email. Adjectives. I asked when we spoke. Nouns, she said, and I could hear the smile. Judges write in nouns. Courtrooms are where adjectives go to get house-trained. Ms. Rhodes from Adult Protective Services stood on my porch in shoes that could be cleaned with a wipe. I start with the ordinary day, she said, stepping inside. Tell me what you do when there is no crisis. Yesterday, I said, I wrote down the time my neighbor waved at me across the fence, took my blood pressure, called the bank to ask a small question, and to make a larger point about paper. I did 30 minutes of stretches with a chair because I am old enough to know the floor is opinionated. I fixed turkey soup from the freezer and labeled a new bag January 2nd, good, because I have learned to leave breadcrumbs for a future me who might be tired. She smiled into her notebook without making me feel adorable. Do you understand your medications? Yes, I said, and told her the doses and the why of each. I let her open the refrigerator because nothing says capacity like fresh eggs with the right date and a produced drawer that isn't a crime scene. The spare keys are in the freezer, I added. It's a joke, I will retire soon. May I write that? Please, I said. Humor is a sign of circulation. We walked room to room. What would you do if you felt unsafe? Lock my door. Call non-emergency. Call my attorney. Turn on the kettle because hot water makes waiting less rude. She nodded. Do you want your children more involved or less? More involved, I said, but not in charge. Involved inside fences with gates. When she left, the house felt measured and seen, like a patient after a good exam. 2 days later, the APS closure notice came. No ongoing services recommended, no protective action needed. A single extra line, the kind that saves time in a hearing, client demonstrates capacity and safety with documented supports. I slid it into Exhibit F and thought of Ms. Rhodes's unflappable shoes carrying truth through other people's kitchens. Mark texted from a number that didn't know me. We can do a life estate. We take title now, you keep possession. It's generous, Mom. We're trying to help. He always sold the future like it was a coupon expiring tonight. I read the text twice, in case generosity had learned a new definition in the night, and called Ms. Lynn. It's tidy because it traps you, she said. You'd be assigning away flexibility for the illusion of peace. If you needed to borrow against equity, you'd be negotiating with the very people whose fear you're trying to house train. I replied to Mark in writing, no. I will not convey present title. Existing trust and power suffice. Put requests in writing through counsel. I archived the thread. Archiving is like putting your future self on the witness list. The constable knocked late afternoon on a day that didn't deserve it. Miss Calder, he asked, eyes level with my dignity. Service of petition for temporary guardianship. Hearing set for 14 days. He was polite enough to understand nobody should be served sadness in a hallway, so he stepped back and let me bring the packet to the table where I sign for deliveries and sometimes cry. The petition used adjectives like a desperate cook uses salt. Confusion. Paranoia about keys. Missed holiday due to disorientation. They said for her own good like it was a statute and not a habit. I put a sticky on the front of the packet and wrote 2 Texas phrases I loved like a vow, clear and convincing and least restrictive alternative. Ms. Lynn arrived the next morning with a portable scanner and a patience that didn't need caffeine. We bait-stamped every page so evidence could find itself without frantic searching. Exhibit A, call logs, my phone records with contemporaneous notes written in a hand that does not tremble when dates are involved. Exhibit B, certified mail, USPS receipts, tracking barcodes, and those green cards when they returned with ink like an argument that finally RSVP'd. Exhibit C, neutral fiduciary, Harper Fiduciary Services Engagement, Janice Harper's roll letter explaining their independence and their logs. Exhibit D, bank, statements, teller camera log notation, Mr. Delgado's manager note. Exhibit E, timeline notes, Tina's sharp as a tack comment from November with June's declaration of time, place, and pancakes. Exhibit F, APS, Ms. Rhodes's closure and the invisible math behind it. Exhibit G, pharmacy, refill slips, counseling logs, what I asked and how I remembered the answers. Exhibit H, notary and POA, Durable power of attorney acknowledgments, trust excerpts, notary page that still smelled like a good pen. Exhibit I, boundaries letter, counsel's calm seatbelt of a letter and proof of delivery. Judges like maps, Ms. Lynn said, aligning the tabs as if squares made ethics easier. This is a map. We did a mock hearing at my kitchen table with the kettle as a bailiff. Ms. Lynn played everyone. My daughter's narrative, my son's concern, the young attorney who would confuse theater with proof. I practiced saying I don't remember when I didn't, I don't agree when a story tried to edit my life, and that date doesn't fit when it didn't. Don't teach, Ms. Lynn said softly. Answer. Judges hate lectures and love witnesses who can count. I have been a mother to 2 teenagers, I said. I can do short answers under cross-examination. At Kirby Lane, June signed a declaration with a firmness I hadn't seen since her divorce. She wrote, I saw the Calder holiday thread assigning dishes and rides, and I did not see Ruth included. I regularly see Ruth manage her pill minder, set calendar alerts, and annotate her receipts. On November 12th, at my potluck, after Ruth corrected the ratio on a cornbread recipe, Tina said, sharp as a tack, I remarked on it because it was funny and true. She added, Ruth writes before she speaks when it matters. The last line made me feel like a person my daughters-in-law could trust if they ever decided to. I stapled June's declaration to Exhibit E and bought her pancakes I knew she wouldn't finish. Consider this hazard pay, I said. At Harper Fiduciary, Janice Harper produced an affidavit that was all spine. We serve as neutral executor/trustee for Ms. Calder. We are independent and have not advised Ms. Calder's family. Our logs show 2 calls from family pressing about keys and consolidation. In our opinion, the present structure, trust plus powers plus professional supports, constitutes a least restrictive alternative to guardianship. She squared the paper stack like a person setting a level on a wall that needs to hold. Families want a referee, she said, until they realize the rules apply to them. I'm fine with rules, I said. It's the improvisers I struggle with. In the courthouse corridor before the hearing, Mark and Tina offered a deal like people offer chairs to someone who's standing just fine. Life estate, Mark repeated, eyes not quite meeting mine. We get title, you keep the right to live there. It avoids all this. It causes all this, I said. I won't mortgage my peace to buy yours. You're making this adversarial, Tina said, voice polished, edges wrapped in sincerity. Courtrooms are adversarial, I said. Family should be scheduled. We walked into a room built to weigh human claims without catching fire. The judge glanced at the petition, at our tabs, at my children. She looked like someone who reads instructions and recipes in faces. Petitioners, she said, you're seeking temporary guardianship, an extraordinary remedy. You know your burden. They called Tina first. She described me as confused, paranoid about keys, and isolated at Christmas. She was careful not to cry. She was less careful with dates. On cross, MS. Lynn approached like a person who knows exactly how a fragile bridge sounds. Ms. Calderhall, did you tell a room of 8 people on November 12th that your mother was sharp as a tack after she corrected your recipe? Tina's eyes moved to a place that wasn't the answer. I may have said something like that. Did your belief about her capacity change before or after a disagreement about house keys and banking? Silence drew itself up into a shape. After, Tina said. MS. Lynn placed Exhibit E on the ledge and let the judge read the sentence that had become a stone you could stand on. Thank you, Ms. Lynn said. No further questions. They called Mark next. He tried to sound like a son and an expert at once, the way people do when they've watched videos about court and mistaken them for school. He spoke about my confusion around Christmas plans. Can you show the court the written invitation sent to your mother? Ms. Lynn asked. We posted in the family thread, he said. To which she was not added, Ms. Lynn said, sliding June's declaration forward. So the plan was assumption and the conclusion accusation. The judge's pen made a note whose tone I could feel from across the room. Mr. Delgado testified like a man who knows the difference between a balance and a story. Ms. Calder does her banking independently, he said. She asks questions that show understanding. No patterns of unusual delegation. Our cameras and logs corroborate this. He placed Exhibit D in a neat fan and stopped humming for the court reporter's sake. The pharmacist spoke with the gravity of a person who explains milligrams to people who've been told to panic. Ms. Calder engages appropriately with counseling. Maintains a pill minder. No concerns. Exhibit G looked suddenly glamorous. Ms. Rhodes from APS took the stand, notebook modest as a hymnal. We visited the home. Observed safety measures, supports, and contingency plans. We closed the case. No protective services needed. Petitioner's counsel tried one of the oldest cross-questions. Could you be wrong? Yes, she said, and we are less wrong when there is paper. Janice Harper testified with square corners. Our independence is the point, she said. A neutral fiduciary exists to keep family from becoming a governance model. The present arrangement is a least restrictive alternative to guardianship. I watched the phrase land like a polite anvil. When it was my turn, I remembered Ms. Lynn's rule. Don't teach, answer. I keep records, I said, because I learned long ago that when love and memory disagree, dates keep their temperature. I pointed to Exhibit A. I wrote this the night my son suggested collecting my keys for my own good. I wasn't angry, I was recording. I want my children involved. I don't want them deputized. Do you have supports? The judge asked. Yes, I said. Bank. Pharmacy. APS. Neutral fiduciary. Counsel. A neighbor who tells the truth about pancakes. Also, I can lock my door, call for help, and make tea. There was a small laugh, the sound of a room exhaling without losing its seriousness. The judge moved her glasses down and then up, as if lifting a gate. Petitioners, you have brought concern. Concern is not clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. Respondent has documented functioning, supports, and multiple less restrictive alternatives in place. The petition for temporary guardianship is denied. Silence was brief and good. Somewhere behind me, paper settled, Exhibit F exhaled, or maybe I did. On the issue of harassment, the judge added, the boundaries letter will guide you. If conduct escalates, civil remedies exist. Family is not a license. In the corridor, Mark looked smaller, as if worry had been holding him up. We were scared, he said, without a lawyer shaping the sentence. Fear is a kind of weather, I said. You dress for it. You don't move into it. Tina touched the edge of her scarf like a person who wants to hold something steady. Can we make rules that feel like love? Yes, I said. Appointments, daytime, no keys, dessert required. That's what love looks like when people have bills and court dates. Back in MS. Lynn's office, we wrote a household protocol that read like a recipe someone had finally tested. Phone hours, visit windows, who can accompany me to doctor appointments and what counts as consent. What decisions require writing and what decisions require silence. At the end we added, pancakes with June remain unscheduled and sovereign. Ms. Lynn laughed and slid the protocol into Exhibit I as if the future could be taught manners. That night, I moved the spare keys from the freezer back to the hook. Not as a surrender, but as a ceremony. I do not live in siege. I wrote the time below the act and slept without the kind of dream where doors don't close. The week after the hearing tasted like tap water, plain, necessary, good for you in ways that aren't exciting. I wrote renewal at the top of the page and underlined it until the word looked less like a promise and more like a plan. On Monday, I washed the cardigan I wore to court because justice and sweat share a fabric. I wrote a letter to myself, a habit I began after my husband died, when the mailbox would cough up bills and condolences, and I needed a friend who could be stamped. Dear Ruthie, you answered simply. You didn't teach. The judge found the words you laid out and used them correctly. Keep your doors unlocked on purpose, not by accident. Keep your pen. Then I did something absurdly ordinary, checked the smoke detector battery, because the theater is over until the next third act and life mostly asks you to change simple things on time. Ms. Lynn scheduled a debrief. We don't celebrate court wins with champagne, she said, because court is like weather, it changes. We celebrate by setting procedures. We made a checklist that fit on one page, quarterly, review trust, powers, beneficiary designations with Harper Fiduciary. Monthly, pick up refills in person, request counseling, file slips behind Exhibit G. Monthly, print and file bank statements, scan the manager's note once per quarter behind Exhibit D. As needed, update boundaries protocol and resend if drift appears. On escalation, call counsel, not children, first. This is overkill, I said, but my voice made it sound like a compliment. Overkill in paper avoids overkill in feelings, Ms. Lin replied. Also, I want you to build a habit that survives good months. We added a footnote in a font good men use. None of this constrains affection. It contains logistics. At Kirby Lane, June lifted her mug like a gavel for people who choose pancakes over power. How does it feel to be officially not incapacitated? She asked. Like being told the floor is where it's always been, I said. Useful, unromantic. You handled yourself, she said. You didn't become a sermon. I brought dates, I said. Judges are allergic to sermons unless they're delivered in numbers. She nodded, then watched me the way old friends perform surveillance out of love. Do you want company when they come by? She asked. Yes, I said, surprised at myself. You can claim to be inspecting my smoke detectors. It's almost not a lie. We laughed, then wrote it down on my household protocol under a line titled Witnesses of Convenience. Mark and Tina came on a Sunday with a pie and their inside voices. We sat at the kitchen table where the petition had once been, and now there was cinnamon. I pointed to the protocol posted on the fridge. No keys. Appointments only. Dessert welcome. Depart by 5 p.m. It read like a motel sign for people who shared my DNA. I read the order again, Mark said. Fork idle. The judge basically told us to grow up. She told all of us to stay inside least restrictive fences, I said. That includes me. Tina looked at me over the pie, eyes full of some mixture you don't put a label on. I'm sorry, she said. I believed my fear meant a problem existed outside of me. That belief is persuasive. It is, I said. It's also a poor meteorologist. They left at 4:59 p.m., obedient to a sign that saved us from ourselves. When the door closed, I cried the way people cry after they hold a plank, not about sorrow, about muscle. The next week, Mark called during phone hours like a man testing a bridge after watching a truck pass. Hey Mom, he said, voice smaller. Can I take you to HB on Friday? I'll wait while you talk to the pharmacist. Yes, I said, if you bring a puzzle in case counseling is long. He laughed, a real one that sounded like the boy who once collected bottle caps because circles felt like a promise. Deal, he said. At the pharmacy, I asked my questions and let him watch how science and patience look when they're in retail. On the way out, I showed him Exhibit G not for court, but for family. You see, I said, this is how I use help without surrendering my keys. He nodded, and a gear I had been grinding against for months slid into place. The postal carrier waved an envelope like a little flag of peace. The green cards had come home, the certified letters delivered, the signatures undeniable. The dates. I slid them into Exhibit B and felt a satisfaction so quiet I would have missed it if I had been 20 years younger and louder. Paper doesn't hug you. It allows hugs later. Janice Harper met me in a room designed by someone who believed furniture could rehabilitate chaos. Square table, square notepads, square pens that refuse to roll. Quarterly review, she said, is where boring does its best work. We confirmed beneficiaries, updated a note about my preferred charities, and added a line to our internal log. Family contact stabilized. Protocol posted. No fiduciary concerns. Do you ever get tired of being neutral? I asked. Neutral isn't apathy, she said. It's a technique. Like good lighting. I thought of my kitchen at 4 p.m., the oak tree throwing geometry across my floor. I like good lighting, I said. MS. Lynn called to say the protective order hearing could be set if we wanted. I think we don't, she said, unless there's a breach. The order you have is the court's denial of guardianship. It carries a moral gravity. Let's use that first. I agree, I said. Paper has a hierarchy. You don't call the sheriff to ask him to carry your groceries. I wrote another letter to myself because it works. Dear Ruthie, you learned to love with structure. You did not punish. You clarified. You turned fear into scheduled visits, need into receipts, and grief into a binder with tabs A. I. If anyone ever reads this to decide if you can decide, point them to the day you made soup and policy in the same hour. I sealed it and labeled it with a date. I'm not dramatic enough to hide it, so I put it behind Exhibit E where other good sentences live. My church friend Marlene called to ask if I wanted to join a walking group in Zilker Park. I'm trying to collect 10 women who know the names of trees, she said. I only know 3 trees, I said. But I can bring dates. Dates are better, she said. Trees don't testify. We laughed and decided on Thursdays. My calendar began to look like a person who had learned to use fences to grow climbing roses instead of to keep out wolves who were busy elsewhere anyway. 2 months later, Mark showed up without an appointment. The doorbell sounded like a pop quiz. I watched my hands. They wanted to open the door as if love meant compliance. Instead, I raised my phone and called him. Hey, I said through the speaker. Protocol says appointments. I was just in the neighborhood, he said, which is to boundaries what it was just a joke is to decency. I love you in every neighborhood, I said. Come back Saturday at 2. I hung up and wrote the time and protocol held in my notebook. The house settled like a good dog. Saturday he came at 2 with tulips and no apology, which was better. Apologies are wind, compliance is architecture. We sat under the oak with lemonade and talked about a baseball game that was not about court but was about rules. For my records, Ms. Lynn sent a clean copy of the order, short, muscular, no embroidery. The court, having considered the petition for temporary guardianship and the evidence presented, finds 1. Petitioners have not met their burden of clear and convincing evidence of incapacity. 2. Less restrictive alternatives exist and are in effect, including a neutral fiduciary, documented supported decision-making, and professional supports. 3. Any alleged harassment is addressed by existing written boundaries and may be enforced through appropriate civil remedies if violated. It is therefore ordered that the petition for temporary guardianship is denied. Costs tax to petitioners. Signed. I placed it in the folder behind the binder because I have learned that even good paper can intimidate a kitchen if it sits out too long. The kitchen is where forgiveness happens. The drawer is where justice naps. A friend from my book club asked me to speak to her aunt, a widow whose son had begun using For Your Own Good like it came with a badge. I told her the recipe, dates, neutral fiduciary, APS if you need an assessment, bank and pharmacy loops, certified letters, boundaries with gates. Don't yell, I said. Annotate. You make it sound easy, she said. It's not easy, I said. It's documented. Spring came to Austin like someone finally opening a window that had stuck all winter. I walked Zilker with women who knew trees and started learning their names because it seemed polite. The live oak outside my kitchen did its geometry again. I made soup and invited Tina to carry a bowl to her car because we had learned that help is different than control, and sometimes they wear the same sweater. We ate at my table with the protocol visible, the way fire exits are visible in rooms where people gather. We talked about least restrictive alternatives like it was a phrase from a hymn none of us had noticed before. It means we keep doors and latches, I said. Not walls. Tina nodded. It means I get to be your daughter again, not your manager. Yes, I said, and it tasted like cinnamon and something repaired. I added one last page to the binder, post-order notes. Dessert appeared, departures on time, laughter observed, no adjectives required. Then I placed the binder on the shelf where tax returns live, because that's what it was now, evidence of adulthood, and I returned my table to soup and puzzles and letters to myself. The keys stayed on their hook. The freezer held ice cream instead of metaphors. The phone rang during phone hours and love sounded less like a siren and more like a calendar alert that made sense. When fear visited, we handed it a seat and a form to fill out. I tapped my pen twice and wrote the date. The oak laid a slow ladder of light across the floor. You can climb a ladder like that without leaving the room.